A millionaire revisited his childhood sweetheart. Learning she'd waited for him made him vow to stay. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's go back to our main character. The steady rhythm of the train filled the night air, wheels humming softly against the tracks as city lights faded into a blur of amber and blue. Ethan Cole sat by the window, his reflection superimposed over the passing landscape. A man in his late 30s, dressed in a tailored coat that didn't quite warm the chill inside him. He'd spent half his life building an empire in San Francisco. But tonight, for the first time in 20 years, he was going home. The town of Willow Creek wasn't much a handful of streets, a diner that still served the same cherry pie, and a bookstore that smelled like old paper and autumn dust. That's where she used to work. Lila Thompson, his childhood sweetheart. The girl who once made him promise that no matter how far he went, he'd find his way back. He'd said he would. Then life, money, ambition, all of it had swallowed that promise whole. Outside the window, the snow had begun to fall, soft and hesitant, like the world was trying not to wake him. But Ethan wasn't asleep, he was haunted. Have you ever tried to outrun the one person who saw you before the world did? He did, and the truth was, it never worked. The train slowed near the small station sign that still read Willow Creek in fading white paint. Ethan exhaled, eyes flicking to the platform where a few locals waited, their breath clouding in the cold. He wasn't sure what he expected. Forgiveness? Closure? Maybe just a glimpse of the life he'd left behind. The moment he stepped off, the air hit him sharp and clean, carrying the faint scent of pine and rain-soaked earth. Main Street looked almost the same. The bakery, the gas station, the Christmas lights tangled on the lampposts, even though it was only early November. He shoved his hands into his pockets, walking past the familiar corners that once felt endless when he was 16. He stopped when he saw at the bookstore. Thompson & Co., the painted sign said, its letters chipped but proud. The lights inside were on. His pulse jumped. For a moment, he just stood there, staring through the frosted glass. Then, slowly, he pushed the door open. The bell chimed softly, like it remembered him. Behind the counter stood a woman arranging a stack of worn hardcovers. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with honey and silver, but the way she looked up, those same steady eyes, made the years collapse. Ethan? Her voice was soft, cautious, and somehow kind. He swallowed. Hey, Lila. She smiled, faint but real. You kept your promise, she said. You came back. He managed a breathless laugh, unsure if it was relief or regret. Eventually, and in that small, quiet bookstore, surrounded by the scent of paper and rain, the noise of the city faded away. The story of their past hadn't ended. It had just been waiting, like her, all this time. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the frosted window of the small inn where Ethan had spent the night. The sheets smelled faintly of detergent and cedar wood, a scent that belonged to small towns, not penthouses. He sat at the edge of the bed, running a hand through his hair, trying to remember when mornings stopped feeling simple. The silence pressed in until his phone buzzed. Messages from his board members blinked across the screen. Deadlines, numbers, meetings. He stared at them for a long second, then turned the phone face down on the nightstand. For once, nothing in that world felt urgent. Downstairs, the smell of coffee drew him into the diner across the street. The bell above the door jingled as he walked in, the same sound from 100 mornings long ago. The waitress, Mrs. Keller, looked up and squinted. Well, I'll be Ethan Cole. Haven't seen you since you were what, 17? He smiled faintly. Something like that. She poured him a cup before he could ask. You look like you could use this. He nodded, wrapping his hands around the mug. Outside the window, Willow Creek moved slowly, people greeting each other by name, the postman whistling off-key, snow melting in small puddles on the sidewalk. For the first time in years, Ethan felt time moving at a human pace. He left a generous tip, ignoring Mrs. Keller's protest, and crossed the street back to the bookstore. Inside, Lila was stacking a new shipment of books, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, sunlight painting her hair gold. You are early, she said without looking up. You used to be late for everything. He chuckled softly. Guess some things change. She smiled. And some do not. There was a quiet ease between them, as if 20 years were only 20 days. He helped her move a heavy box of old novels, brushing dust from the covers. You still run this place alone? He asked. Mostly, she said. My dad passed 5 years ago. The store keeps me busy. It keeps me here. Ethan hesitated. I am sorry, Lila. I should have called back then. She looked at him, calm, not bitter. You were building your life. I understood. Everyone leaves this town sooner or later. I just never did. Her voice trailed off, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The clock on the wall ticked softly, counting the spaces between words. He glanced at the photos lining the counter, snapshots of school fairs, local festivals, kids holding books. She followed his gaze. The town lost its library funding a while ago, she said, so the shop doubles as a reading space. The kids come after school. We do story nights on Fridays. Ethan smiled. That sounds perfect. She laughed quietly. It is not perfect, but it is good. He studied her face, noticing the fine lines near her eyes, the ones carved by both laughter and waiting. You really stayed, he said. You kept everything alive. Lila shrugged lightly. Someone had to. He wanted to say more, to ask if she ever thought of him, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he picked up one of the worn books. The inside cover was signed in his own teenage handwriting, to Lila, for every chapter we will write someday. He froze. She smiled softly, watching him trace the faded ink. I found that after you left, she said. I could not throw it away. Ethan exhaled, feeling the years collapse again. Lila, she shook her head gently. You do not have to explain anything, Ethan. You came back. That says enough. The bell over the door chimed as a group of kids rushed in, laughing, carrying backpacks and snowflakes. Lila greeted them by name, handing out cocoa packets and worn paperbacks. Ethan watched her, the way she moved among them like sunlight, and in that moment, he understood something he had forgotten. Success had filled his life, but it had never made it full. Lila had done that without ever leaving this little corner of the world. As the children gathered on the rug for story time, she glanced back at him, eyes soft. Stay for a while, she said. You might remember how to breathe. He smiled, and for the first time in years, he truly did. That evening, the small bookstore glowed like a lantern against the cold street. The snow had stopped, leaving the air still and sharp. Ethan stayed after the children had gone, helping Lila close up. The shelves were uneven, the floorboards creaked, but the place felt alive. He watched her as she counted the register, her lips moving softly as she added the numbers in her head. There was something steady about her, something that made the noise in his mind finally quiet. You never changed, he said quietly. Lila looked up. Neither did you. You just learned to hide better. He smiled faintly, but the truth in her words struck deep. He walked to the window, looking at the reflection of the streetlights on the wet pavement. I built everything I thought I wanted, he said. But somewhere along the way, I lost the reason I started. Lila wiped her hands on a cloth and joined him. Do you remember when you used to draw blueprints in the dirt behind my house? You said one day you would design the biggest building in the city, and I said I would open a bookstore under it. He chuckled softly. You actually did it, just not under my building. She laughed, a sound that wrapped around him like warmth. I had to keep one of us honest. They stood side by side, the silence between them full but not heavy. When he turned to look at her, her eyes were already on him. I missed you, he said, more than I ever admitted to myself. Lila smiled, though her gaze flickered downward. You missed a version of me that stopped existing a long time ago. No, he said, his voice low, certain. I think I missed the only version of myself that ever mattered. She inhaled slowly, as if afraid to believe him. Ethan, you cannot rewrite time. What is gone is gone. Maybe, he said, but you are still here. He reached out, his hand brushing hers. It was a simple touch, but it carried 20 years of silence. She did not pull away. Instead, she looked out at the quiet street. You should go home, she whispered. It is late. He nodded, but neither of them moved. Finally, she smiled and added softly, I will see you tomorrow? You will, he said. Outside, the night was velvet, dark. Ethan walked back to the inn, his breath visible in the cold air. He could still feel the warmth of her hand, the ghost of her laughter. In his room, he sat by the window, looking down at Main Street. For the first time in years, he did not open his laptop or check his phone. He simply watched the town breathe. The next morning, he returned early. Lila was outside, sweeping snow from the steps. "You really meant it," she said with a grin. "I told you I would be back," he replied. They worked side by side, clearing the walkway. A few townspeople stopped to wave. Some recognized him. Others only saw another man with a shovel. It felt good, honest. When the job was done, Lila handed him a cup of cocoa. "You know," she said, "you could help with the fundraiser next week. The shop needs new shelves." He nodded. "Tell me what to do," she smiled. "You will regret saying that." The fundraiser turned into a small-town event. Handmade pies, paper banners, laughter echoing through the cold air. Ethan found himself hammering nails, carrying boxes, talking to people who had never heard of his company but knew his parents, his high school, his old dog named Rusty. Every face reminded him that he used to belong somewhere. Late that afternoon, as the last table was cleared, Lila walked over with a shy smile. "We did it," she said. "The shop will survive another year." Ethan looked around at the people waving goodnight, the children running through the snow. "You were never just keeping a bookstore alive," he said. "You were keeping the heart of this town beating." She looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, "Maybe now you can help it beat a little stronger." And in that instant, he knew he did not want to leave again. By the end of the week, Willow Creek had turned into a snow globe of lights and laughter. The fundraiser was a success, and the bookstore buzzed with life again. Ethan found himself spending every day there, fixing shelves, helping customers, learning how to work with his hands instead of contracts. Lila teased him often, calling him Mr. Corporate turned handyman, and he took it with a grin he had not worn in years. Each evening ended the same way, with them locking up together as the last bit of daylight faded from the windows. The warmth between them grew quietly, naturally, like an old melody finding its rhythm again. But one night, as they were closing, Ethan's phone rang. It was his assistant from San Francisco. "Sir, the board has been calling non-stop. There is a deal pending. Investors want you back by Monday." He looked at the glowing screen for a long moment before hanging up. Lila noticed the shift in his expression. "Everything all right?" He hesitated. "Just business. The kind that never ends." She nodded slowly. "You cannot run from your world forever, Ethan." He sighed. "I am not sure I want that world anymore." She gave a small smile, one mixed with kindness and realism. "Then you have to decide which one is yours." That night, he barely slept. The hotel room felt smaller than ever. He kept replaying her words until morning. When he returned to the store, Lila was unpacking new donations boxes of books from the townspeople. "Look," she said with quiet pride, "they remember what this place means." He helped her sort through them, his fingers brushing against a stack of children's books. Inside one, he found a small note. "To Lila, for the next generation of dreamers," signed by one of their old teachers. He smiled, then looked at her. "You built something real here," he said. "Something money cannot buy." Lila looked up, her eyes steady. "Maybe you could build something real too, Ethan, not out there. Here." Before he could answer, the door opened, and a gust of wind brought in a man in a suit. "Mr. Cole," the man said, removing his gloves. "Thank goodness I found you. The board has been trying to reach you. The acquisition deadline is in 48 hours. We need your approval." The words crashed through the warm air like ice. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You tracked me down here?" "We had no choice," the man said. "This is billions on the line." Ethan turned away, staring at the shelves he had helped build, the children's drawings pinned to the counter, the handwritten signs for story night. Lila stood quietly, watching him battle the life he had chosen against the one that chose him. "I will call you later," Ethan said, voice calm but final. The man frowned. "Sir, this could change the company's future." Ethan's gaze did not waver. "It already has." When the man left, the store fell silent except for the ticking clock. Lila walked over, folding her arms loosely. "He is right about one thing," she said softly. "It will change your future." Ethan looked at her, eyes tired, but sure. "So will staying." She studied him for a moment before asking, "What is it that you are afraid of, Ethan? Losing your empire or facing what you really want?" He had no answer. She smiled gently. "Then maybe you already know." That evening, he joined her at the community center for story night. The room was full parents, kids, laughter echoing off the old walls. Lila read aloud, her voice calm and melodic. Ethan sat in the back, watching her glow beneath the string lights. For the first time, he felt what peace could look like. When the story ended, the children clapped, and Lila's eyes found his across the room. She did not need to speak. Her smile said everything. Afterward, as they walked home through the snow, she asked quietly, "When do you go back?" Ethan stopped, looking at her beneath the falling snow. "I do not know yet," he said. "Maybe never." She exhaled softly. "Be careful, Ethan. Sometimes the heart lies just to make you stay." He nodded, but deep down, he knew the truth. His heart was finally telling the truth. The morning after story night, the first light of dawn touched the snow-dusted rooftops of Willow Creek. Ethan awoke before the town stirred, his thoughts restless. He walked to the window of the small inn and watched the world outside the bookstore sign across the street faintly visible through the haze. Every part of him wanted to cross that road again, but something inside held him still. His phone vibrated on the nightstand. Dozens of messages blinked across the screen, emails from the board, legal documents awaiting his signature, his assistant's reminders. He stared at the notifications before pressing the power button and turning the device off completely. For the first time in years, he let the silence settle. Later that morning, he walked to the bookstore with 2 cups of coffee. Lila was already there, arranging books on the window display. "You are early again," she said, smiling softly as he handed her one of the cups. "And you remembered I take mine with cinnamon." "Some things are worth remembering," he replied. She tilted her head, studying him. "You look like you did not sleep." He chuckled. "I was thinking." "About leaving?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "About staying." She did not respond right away, just turned to the shelf beside her, her fingers tracing the edge of a book titled Homecoming. "You know, Ethan," she said gently, "staying is not always the brave choice. Sometimes it is running in disguise." He watched her quietly, understanding what she meant. The store door opened just then, and Mrs. Keller from the diner stepped inside, carrying a box of muffins. "I thought you two might need breakfast," she said cheerfully. "The whole town is still talking about last night. That story hour brought everyone together. Felt like the old days." Lila thanked her, and Ethan smiled, realizing how deeply connected everyone here was to each other, to the place itself. After Mrs. Keller left, he leaned against the counter. "You made something special here, Lila. People need this. They need you." She looked down, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "They need all of us, Ethan. It takes a community." He nodded, his voice low. "Maybe that is what I was missing all along." The rest of the day passed in quiet rhythm, sorting, shelving, laughing about small mistakes. When evening came, they closed early and walked along the frozen path toward the lake. The old oak tree still stood there, its branches bare against the winter sky. Lila brushed snow off the trunk and smiled. "Do you remember this place?" He nodded. "How could I forget? It was where I first told you I was going to leave." She smiled sadly. "And I told you I would wait." Her words hung in the cold air, soft and fragile. He turned toward her. "You really did wait, didn't you?" She looked at him with eyes that carried years of patience and pain. "I did not wait for you, Ethan. I waited for the person I believed you could become. I just did not know it would take this long." His throat tightened. "I do not deserve that kind of faith." "No," she said, "you do not, but maybe you can honor it." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The lake shimmered faintly under the pale moonlight. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object, a silver keychain shaped like an oak leaf. "This was from the first blueprint I ever designed," he said. "I kept it all these years, even when I forgot why. I think I remember now." He placed it in her palm. "For the store, for the future, for us, if you will let there be one." Lila stared at the keychain, her eyes glistening. "Ethan," she whispered, "you cannot just come back and rewrite everything with a gesture." "I know," he said softly. "That is why I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for time to do it right this time." She exhaled slowly, her breath visible in the cold. "Then time will tell," she said, and she closed her fingers around the keychain. As they stood beneath the oak, The wind picked up, scattering flakes of snow around them. Ethan looked at her and felt something he had not felt in 2 decades, hope that did not come from ambition, but from belonging. Winter deepened in Willow Creek, and with it came a calm Ethan had never known. Weeks passed quietly. He split his days between helping at the bookstore and consulting remotely with his company. The distance between his old world and this one began to stretch thinner each day, until he could no longer tell which felt more real. The townspeople had grown used to him being around. Children waved when he walked down Main Street. The local mechanic asked for advice on a small business loan, and Mrs. Keller always had a fresh cup of coffee waiting for him at the diner. For the first time, Ethan felt part of something that did not require him to earn it. One snowy afternoon, he arrived at the bookstore to find Lila sitting behind the counter, a faint exhaustion in her eyes. "You do not look well," he said. She smiled weakly. "Just a little tired. It has been a busy week," he frowned. "You should rest." "Rest does not pay the heating bill," she replied, trying to laugh, but the sound faltered. He stepped closer, concern deepening. "When was the last time you saw a doctor?" "Ethan, please," she said softly. "I am fine." But the tremor in her hand told him otherwise. That evening, as she locked up, she swayed slightly, catching herself against the doorway. He caught her before she could fall. "Lila!" Her breathing came shallow, color drained from her face. Without hesitation, he carried her to his truck and drove straight to the nearest clinic. The snow was falling hard, visibility low, but he did not slow down. Inside the small hospital, the nurse recognized them immediately. "She will be all right," the doctor said later. "Exhaustion, mild pneumonia. She needs rest and proper care." Ethan sat by her bedside through the night, watching her breathe. The room was quiet except for the hum of the heater. He felt the weight of guilt pressing down on him. He had seen the signs, ignored them, believed she was invincible like before. When she opened her eyes the next morning, he was still there, holding a cup of tea gone cold. "You stayed," she whispered, voice rough. "Of course I did," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "You scared me." She smiled faintly. "I told you, I am harder to get rid of than you think." He took her hand gently. "Do not joke about that." "Then do not look at me like that," she murmured. "Like you owe me something." He shook his head. "It is not debt, it is devotion." She blinked, surprised by the softness in his voice. "Ethan," she whispered, "you cannot put your life on hold for me. Maybe my life was waiting for this," he said quietly. "For you." She turned her face away, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "You do not have to say that." "I know," he replied, "but I want to." For the next few days, he rarely left her side. He brought books from the store, read to her in the evenings, made sure she ate properly. The nurses smiled whenever they passed, whispering that they had never seen a man so determined. As Lila's strength returned, so did her humor. "You are terrible at reading out loud," she teased one afternoon. "Then it is good you are getting better," he said with a grin. "You can take over." When she was finally discharged, the whole town seemed to celebrate. The children left handmade cards at the bookstore door, and Mrs. Keller brought an entire basket of soup and bread. Standing outside the store that evening, Lila looked at Ethan. "You should not have worried so much. You should have told me sooner," he replied. "You are not alone anymore, Lila." She looked at him, her eyes shining in the dim light. "I know," she said softly. "And that is what makes it both beautiful and terrifying." As snow began to fall again, she added quietly, "You said you wanted time to do things right. Maybe this is your chance." Ethan reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining as softly as the snow around them. "Then I am not wasting another second," he said. And for the first time, Lila did not pull away. Spring arrived in Willow Creek like a promise finally kept. The snow melted into the soil, revealing green beneath the gray, and the bookstore's windows filled with light again. Lila's health had improved, her laughter returning little by little, though she still tired easily. Ethan stayed in town, refusing every call from San Francisco that tried to pull him back. He spent his mornings helping repair the porch of the shop and his evenings walking with Lila by the lake. They talked about everything and nothing books, childhood memories. The way the stars looked clearer here than anywhere else. One afternoon, as they shelved new donations, Lila found an envelope between 2 novels. It was addressed to her in a familiar handwriting, Ethan's, but from years ago. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The paper had yellowed slightly, the ink faded. It was a letter he had written the week he left town, but had never sent. "Dear Lila," it began, "I am afraid of how much I care about you. I'm afraid that if I stay, I will never become the man I dreamed to be. But I promise, when I finally find that man, I will come back to you." She looked up at him, her eyes wet. "You really wrote this?" He nodded, his voice low. "I meant every word. I just never thought I would be 20 years late." She smiled through tears. "You were not late, Ethan. You were just lost." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then maybe I have been found." For a while, they stood there, surrounded by the quiet hum of the shop. Outside, the first blossoms trembled on the branches, fragile but certain, yet peace never came without its test. A week later, a black car appeared outside the store. Ethan's assistant stepped out, holding a folder. "Sir," she said gently, "the board is threatening to remove you as CEO. They need you in San Francisco. If you do not return, everything you built could be gone." Lila overheard the conversation. Her expression remained calm, but her hands stilled on the counter. Ethan exhaled heavily. "Tell them to do what they must. I am not leaving again." The assistant looked shocked. "Sir, you cannot just walk away. This is your life." "No," he said, his eyes fixed on Lila. "This is." When the assistant left, Lila crossed her arms. "You cannot sacrifice everything, Ethan. Not for me." "It is not sacrifice," he replied. "It is choice." She shook her head. "And what happens when you regret it? When this town feels too small? When I am not enough?" "That will never happen," he said quietly. "You saved me, Lila." She turned away, trying to hide the tears in her eyes. "I did not save you. You did that yourself. I just reminded you who you were." He stepped closer, voice steady. "Then let me remind you of something too. Love is not about leaving people behind for dreams that mean nothing. It is about staying and building something that does." For a long time, she said nothing. Finally, she looked at him, her voice trembling. "Ethan, I waited half my life for you, but I cannot be the reason you destroy yours." He took her hands in his, firm but gentle. "You are not destroying it. You are giving it meaning." The air between them was charged with the weight of everything they had endured. Then, slowly, she nodded. "All right," she whispered. "Then build it here." Over the next few days, Ethan began transforming the old storage room at the back of the shop into a reading space with new furniture and shelves. The community volunteered, laughing and painting late into the night. Lila watched from the doorway, her heart full. She realized this was not a man running away anymore. It was a man finally coming home. And as he looked at her across the room, covered in paint and smiling wider than she had ever seen, she knew after all the waiting, the years of silence and hope, he was finally staying for real. By summer, the little bookstore had become more than just a shop. It was the heart of Willow Creek. The new reading room glowed with soft amber lights, filled with shelves Ethan had built himself, each one carved with care. Children sprawled on beanbags as Lila read stories, and parents lingered to talk about books and life. The community felt alive again, and for once, Ethan did not feel like an outsider looking in. He was part of it. Yet beneath the joy, something else stirred, a quiet realization that life was fragile, that happiness was a thing that had to be tended like a flame. One afternoon, while painting a small sign for the door, Lila grew pale, her hand trembling slightly. Ethan caught the brush before it fell. "You need to rest," he said, concern flickering in his voice. She smiled, brushing him off. "You worry too much." "Not enough, apparently," he replied, leading her to the couch. "You are burning yourself out again." She leaned back, watching the sunlight stream through the window. "I just want this place to be perfect," she whispered. "You already made it perfect," he said, "and you are the reason why." Her eyes softened, filled with warmth and something unspoken. "You make it sound like I am a miracle." "You are," he said simply. The words hung in the air between them, fragile but true. Days passed gently, marked by laughter, coffee, and the scent of new books. Ethan had found a rhythm he never knew he needed, one built on quiet mornings and evenings that ended with Lila's voice reading softly from her favorite stories. But just as peace settled in, a letter arrived that threatened to pull him back into his old life. It was from the company's board of directors, delivered by courier. They had accepted his resignation, but they had also offered him a final proposition, an enormous buyout for his shares, enough money to last several lifetimes. Ethan stared at the letter in disbelief. The offer was both a farewell and a temptation. When Lila found him sitting on the porch, the envelope still unopened beside him, she asked, "Bad news?" "No," he said quietly. "Just another test." "From them?" she asked. "From life," he replied. "They want me to come back one last time, to sign the papers in person." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Will you?" He took a long breath. "I do not know." That night, Ethan could not sleep. He walked through the empty streets, past the lampposts wrapped in ivy, and the lake shimmering under the moonlight. He thought about everything, his empire, his wealth, the man he used to be. He realized he could rebuild a company 100 times over, but he could never rebuild what he had found here. The next morning, he told Lila he was going to San Francisco to sign the papers. Her face fell, though she tried to hide it. "So this is goodbye again?" "No," he said, holding her gaze. "This time, it is just one last chapter to close properly." She nodded slowly. "Then promise me something, Ethan. Do not go there to fight. Go there to finish." He smiled faintly. "That is the only thing I plan to do." He left that afternoon, driving through winding roads lined with wildflowers. When he reached the city, the noise and speed felt foreign, almost unbearable. At the office, his name still gleamed on the glass wall, but he no longer felt ownership over it. He signed the documents in silence. His assistant asked quietly, "Are you sure about this?" Ethan smiled, setting down the pen. "For the first time, yes." As he walked out of the building, a warm breeze carried the scent of the bay. He looked back one last time, not with regret, but with gratitude. The empire was behind him now. What waited ahead was something far greater. He drove all night, headlights cutting through the darkness until the first light of dawn touched the fields near Willow Creek. When he reached the bookstore, the sign on the door glowed softly in the morning sun. "Open hearts, open pages." He smiled, realizing Lila had changed the name. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Cole felt free. The sun had barely risen when Ethan parked outside the bookstore. The sky above Willow Creek glowed in soft shades of pink and gold, the air cool and quiet, as if the town itself was still dreaming. He stepped out of the car, his coat brushing against his legs, and for a moment he simply stood there, watching the morning light hit the sign that now read, "Open hearts, open pages." It was Lila's handwriting, delicate but firm, just like her. When he pushed open the door, the familiar chime greeted him. The smell of paper and coffee filled the air. Lila was behind the counter, sorting through a box of donations. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face, followed by a smile that reached her eyes. "You are back early," she said softly. He nodded, setting his bag down. "I signed everything. It is done." She hesitated. "And the company?" "It belongs to someone else now." I walked away. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you really did it." "Yes," he said simply. "For the first time, I did not choose money. I chose home." She stepped closer, searching his face. "Are you sure you will not regret it?" "The only thing I regret," he said, "is not coming back sooner." For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy and gentle at once. Then she reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Welcome home," she whispered. The bell above the door jingled again as a group of children ran in, laughter echoing through the small shop. Lila smiled and knelt to greet them while Ethan watched, feeling his chest tighten not with fear, but with gratitude. This was what life was meant to feel like. Later that afternoon, the whole town gathered for the reopening celebration. Strings of lights hung across the street, and music floated in the warm summer air. Mrs. Keller passed out slices of pie, and the local band played by the fountain. Lila stood beside Ethan as they looked at the crowd. "I never thought I would see this place so full again," she said. "That is because you never stopped believing in it," he replied. She laughed softly. "And what about you, Mr. Cole? What will you do now?" He smiled. "I already am doing it." As the sun dipped lower, the mayor took the small stage set up outside and called for everyone's attention. "We would like to thank the people who made this bookstore more than just a place for stories," he said. "It became the soul of Willow Creek again, thanks to Lila Thompson and Ethan Cole." The crowd erupted in applause. Lila blushed, and Ethan squeezed her hand gently. When the noise faded, he turned to her. "There is something I want to say." She looked at him, curious. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The sight made her freeze. "Ethan," she whispered, "what are you doing?" He took her hand, his eyes steady. "You waited for me when I did not deserve it. You reminded me of what love really means: patience, kindness, truth. I came back to finish the story we started, and I do not ever want to leave again. Lila, will you marry me?" The crowd had gone completely silent. Lila covered her mouth with trembling fingers, tears glistening in her eyes. "You are serious?" He nodded. "More than I have ever been about anything." For a long moment, she could not speak. Then she whispered, "Yes. Of course, yes." The applause that followed was thunderous, but all Ethan heard was her voice. He slipped the ring on her finger, and they embraced under the glow of the string lights, laughter and music swirling around them. That night, after everyone had gone home, they sat together under the old oak by the lake. Fireflies flickered around them, and the reflection of the moon rippled across the water. Lila leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had never come back?" she asked quietly. Ethan smiled. "Then I would have spent the rest of my life rich in money and poor in everything that matters." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "And now?" He kissed her forehead softly. "Now I am the luckiest man alive." The camera of the world might have panned out then, showing two figures beneath the stars, a small town sleeping around them, and the light from the bookstore glowing like a heartbeat in the dark. But for Ethan and Lila, there was no ending, just the rest of their story, unfolding one quiet, beautiful day at a time.